r/ask Reddit. Hiring managers. What is the biggest red flag on a resume? People keep saying gaps in work history, but honestly guys, make sure you inquire about it before just writing someone off. I had a guy who had a year or two gap in his resume. Most people would just write this dude as well, obviously there's something wrong with him. Well, there was. The dude was diagnosed with brain cancer and had to go through intensive treatment. He lived but came out the other end jobless. Couldn't find work afterwards because of the gap. I could tell he was a smart dude who just had a bad hand of cards. He was hired and he's honestly worked out great and still works at that company. Listing every single accomplishment from high school and or middle school. When you've been out of high school for 10 plus years. Had a guy list every part he got in a musical play, sports he played, with scores, clubs he was a part of, etc. All of these dated from at least elementary school on. The man was 50 plus. The job had nothing to do with any of these items. I once had a guy submit a resume saying that he could not work with women or speak to any woman due to religious reasons. I'm all for being tolerant of other people's beliefs, but this was for a customer service job. If you can't interact with women at all, then maybe this wasn't the kind of job he should have been applying for. A watermark of their face on each page of a resume. Edit. This was in Canada for a food retail position. Also thanks for the awards and upvotes. This is now by far my most upvoted post. I was a manager at a trampoline park when I was 16/17 and did all the interviews since the majority of the applicants went to the same high school as me. There was a guy that was in his late 30s who had hardly any job experience and a bachelor's degree. If I recall correctly, it was literature related. His age was kinda weird since most of the staff were in high school college. But having a degree completely caught me off guard. Asked him why he wanted to work minimum wage when he had a degree. He explained that he was going to be a teacher but they wouldn't hire him because of his criminal history. He proceeded to tell me he had sexually assaulted a child. He was applying for a job at a kid's trampoline park. Looked on the cameras before he left since he gave me a real bad feeling and saw him taking pictures of kids. He left before I could confront him. So I gave his resume and a hard drive with the entire recording of his visit to the local police department. Edit. Obligatory thank you for the award. I've seen someone put their certificate of baptism under certificates and awards. Edit. Row. I didn't expect this comment to garner this sort of response. Maybe I should add that the job had absolutely nothing to do with religion, which is why the baptism cert seemed so out of place. I once got a resume that listed under his award section champion and master of the Chuggen Tug of some Damasasu fraternity whose name I can't remember. I'm still not 100% certain what the duck that is, but I know I didn't want it. A very unprofessional email is definitely one. You see some insane emails. I knew someone who got an email address that had Big Daddy in it. Man, I'm so glad the email I made in 6th grade is just my name plus some numbers at the end. Had it for like 13 years now. Ducking hell. I feel old. I used to do the hiring tridge for a university library. Gearing up for the fall semester, I'd have to read through 500 plus applications. My record was in the 750s. For a usual 30 hires, used to get some terrible ones. The most common were L33T text SPK, all lowercase, all caps, 3-word answers to multi-part questions. No federal work study award, not an indication of a bad applicant, but we were clear up front that we couldn't hire anyone without it. Simply couldn't afford it. Since a student with WS cost us about 1/3 what an hourly student would. Terrible availability, also not an indication of a bad applicant. But if you say you're only available for 2 hours Tuesday, Thursday, and every other Wednesday, don't expect a call. Ignoring the questions about putting things in alphabetical or numerical order, doing them but obviously not reading the directions ascending versus descending order, or, to lesser extent, getting them wrong. Normally, calling to check up on your application was an immediate bump up to be forwarded on for further consideration, assuming availability and WS checked out. But if you had your parents call, came in one day, I worked 4 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. to a blinking light on my phone, indicating voicemail. Checked it. Several messages. First message, 8:30ish am. was from an angry woman demanding I call back by 12 to explain why we hadn't hired her son. Second message, 10:30ish am. Same woman, snarling that I hadn't called and that she would have my job because her son had work study. Therefore we legally must hire him. LOL. No, because he wants to work in the library. Third message, 11ish am. From my supervisor, wondering if I could find the son's application, as she'd gotten an angry voicemail from the mother, and when she looked in my files, she hadn't seen it anywhere. Other normal messages followed. Well, since this woman demanded I call before 12, I was all gung-ho to call her at 11:45 PM to explain my work schedule to her and that I couldn't legally discuss her son's application anyway. But I figured I should talk to my supervisor and at least warn her of this plan. Turns out, when the woman called again, around 2 PM, she got forwarded to my supervisor, who had remembered the internal online database of applicants I'd created for her and the other hiring supervisors to check when I was out. Using that, she discovered that the kid's file wasn't in my desk because I'd initially rated him fairly well. Worth another look. Armed with that info and notes on his file, she told mommy dearest what was going on. Damn. I wish I could have seen that woman's face when she was told we didn't hire her son because he never called us back when we contacted him for an interview. Not an employer, but failed miserably to get a high school job. I thought I was doing everything right. I mentioned previous volunteer experience, work ethic, and always came dressed in a button-up shirt, slacks, and a tie for interviews, or even asking about a job. After a year of getting turned down by Taco Bell, KFC, and really any good high school job, I found the issue. Under the previous criminal charges section I put assault and battery. 17-year-old me had a loose grasp on the legal system and didn't realize that getting arrested for a fight is not the same as being charged with a felony. I had been arrested on an assault misdemeanor, but never charged. Unfortunately that revelation didn't come until I applied for military service and was told my felony charge was a permanent disqualification. Military service, US, Army wife, Lieutenant Colonel. The only reason I can see putting anything about a spouse's military service is to explain an employment gap if you move to a foreign base with them. Even that doesn't go under military service. Thought of another, although it's an interview. Being a dong in an interview. I work in a predominantly male trade. I'm a service-led, so I do know my trade. I may be on the younger side, but I've been working in this business for over 10 years. My male boss asked me to start and interview a guy before he got there as he's running late and the guy was going to be my employee anyways. The guy comes and seems okay at first, then it goes downhill quickly. Asks me for coffee from Starbucks, not office coffee. He wanted me to go fetch him Starbucks? Hell no. So that's not bad enough. So starts asking me interview questions, like trick questions. Starts trying to tell me I'm so smart, but in that tone. He's being just generally a dong. I'm done. I tell him that the interview is over. He says I'll wait for the boss to do my actual interview. He wouldn't leave. Boss eventually comes in and throws him out. We think he had to get interviews for unemployment or something but actually didn't want to work. Why else would you intentionally tank your prospects so ducking hard? Edit. Thank you for all your comments and stories. Such a shame that mine isn't an isolated incident. I will note that there was never any follow-up by an unemployment office or such. My last paragraph was purely speculation. Thank you to everyone for reading my post. Stay safe out there. You matter. You make the world better by being in it. Unless you are the guy in my story, then what the duck? Dude, have a great day. The guy who applied for a design job and attached a photoshopped image of him as a centaur comes to mind. Also typos. I was hiring a very senior level person who seemed like they could do an amazing job, but there were several typos on her resume. I asked the recruiter to let her know. If this phrase is written anywhere, my chickens have come home to roost. What if they're applying for a position on a chicken farm? I see a lot of too many jobs in a short time as a response. And I get that for some people that's a red flag. But I think for many people they get hired by people who don't understand that employees have expectations too. A few of the jobs I've had for less than a year. During the interview, I said I needed to make at least $100 per shift. They hired me. I averaged $25 for the first month. So I quit. After I trained and got my first paycheck, I told the person who hired me, it says here that I got paid for 2 shifts. But last week I trained for 3 shifts before I was on my own for 2. So I was here for 5 shifts. You don't get paid for training. The last time I checked the NY Labor Department website, it said that trainings were paid. Maybe there was a change. They never scheduled me again. Applied for a server job. We don't have one of those, but we do have the counter position open. It's basically the same. Does it pay the same? Almost. And we'll get you as a server in a month or 2 when we have room. 5 months later, they hired an outside server, and the pay wasn't almost the same. I quit. During the interview, yes, I can work Mondays. All of them. Except the 6th of April. I have a tech rehearsal that day all day. No problem. We'll work around it. They scheduled me. I reminded them I couldn't work. They told me to get it covered if I needed it covered. I tried, but couldn't. They fired me for not showing up. During the interview, yes, I can work brunches on Saturdays and Sundays, but on Sundays I have to be walking out the door at 3:30 so I can make it to my other job. Sure, shouldn't be a problem. 2 months in. Hey, Steve called out so you'll have to close this morning. I have to be out the door at 3:30. You can't stay until 4? No. Apparently, it was a problem. Edit. Thanks for the awards, folks. When people apply through Facebook jobs and it pulls the info from their profile, you end up with shit like went to the University of Life or I only work for me and no one else as a headline on their application. It's hard to take that seriously. What on earth is Facebook jobs? Doesn't stop me from hiring anyone, but changes things up when someone says they speak another language. If it's Spanish, you'll be interviewed in Spanish. Sometimes that goes very poorly for the applicant. Lies. I'm that hiring manager that'll dig into the weird shit. You're interviewing for an enterprise software job but list Unity 3D on there? Let's dig in. You're interviewing for a React gig but for some reason list Raspberry Pi project to control a kegerator. Let's talk about that one. You wrote a Minecraft plugin? Okay, let's figure that out. I figure the weirder the thing on the resume is, the higher the chance you were passionate about it. If you aren't, then you're probably not being truthful about much else. This isn't the end all be all, of course. Not everyone even has weird totally unrelated to the job stuff on their resume. But if you do, remember, it's fair game. We had an application where the applicant had a felony on their record. They spent half a page in the middle of their resume explaining how the felony wasn't their fault and that we should hire them. Their felony was from stealing from another department from the last time they worked at the company they were applying to. It's a big company, so I'd think they were hoping we wouldn't care since we were in a different department. I don't know how they made it through the HR pre-screen and how they weren't on the do not hire list. Reason for leaving. Too much drama. Written like a 4th grader. So I'm reading a lot of the same ideas and frustrations over and over here. What is someone supposed to do when they are dealing with a work gap? Do they tell the truth and hope it works out, or do they ignore it and hope to be hired? I had to leave my dream job at the year mark due to health reasons I can't disclose to an employer, and I'd like some direct guidance on what to do in order to be hired again now that I have a better handle on things. I have rearranged my resume to be skill-based instead of date-based. I used to list my jobs in the order in which I worked them along with the accompanying dates. But for the last job I applied for, my skills from 2 or 3 jobs ago applied, but my most recent job skills really didn't, and I wanted to front-load the applicable skills. So I rearranged my whole resume to be skill-based. Now I'll list a type of job I've held, and under that, group all of the skills that I have that apply to that type of job. No matter where I was working at the time I acquired those skills. Then I'll list another type of job and the associated skills. It's not until the end of my resume that I have a short section summarizing my actual work dates, but by then they've already been front-loaded with my skills. Instead of this, manufacturing, data, date B, skill engineering, date B, date C, skill engineering, date C, date D, skill. I do this. Engineering skill manufacturing skill employment history manufacturing. Data. Date B. Engineering. Date B. Date C. Engineering. Date C. Date D. Edit. Formatting. I have a certificate of knighthood, or whatever from Sealand. I like to think that would at least pique a potential employer's interest, but I am not currently willing to risk it. Edit. I appreciate the correction. It's late here. I wasn't an actual manager my old firearms retail job, but being that I was the senior sales associate, my manager included my input in the hiring process, which entailed a lot of resume reviews. We had a guy in his late teens early 20s drop off a resume for an open gunsmith position. He had no technical training, no gunsmith training, and had never even owned a gun before. He had recently joined the National Guard, and his only experience with firearms was basic orientation and cleaning of the M16 in basic training. His resume basically said just this, in one run-on sentence. His resume explained that he had no idea how to write a resume and had no training in gunsmithing, but that he needed a job, was interested in guns. So please disregard all this and give him a job because he was serving his country. Every time threads like this come up, I need to remind myself that it pretty much only applies to office jobs. Today I learned that applying for jobs is a ducking pain in the ass. Would rather stick to my not so reliable but pays enough to get by and not a ducking of conditions freelance job. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.